It's been a while, I know. I'm sorry. It's been a busy couple months with the move and all, but everything's starting to get sorted out, so we're going to pick up where we left off. Before that happens though, I decided to put this video together. It's the subject with many questions revolving around it, and well, hey, I'll just call it what everyone else calls it. We'll just call it how to scale your Pepakura, but really and honestly, there's more to it than that. That's why this will be how to measure, scale, and size your Pepakura. Just because those are the three most important aspects of it. It's not just a matter of scaling. And I think for a lot of people, they just seem to have a difficult time to get their head around this. So we'll try and shed some light on this and see what we can do with it. Probably the most rudimentary place to start would be to measure the surface that you're making a pep for. Now, one thing to always bear in mind, and it's a good place and point of reference to start from, is to measure the largest surface. So today we'll be dealing with a Mark 6 forearm or a gauntlet, whatever have you. So first thing I'm going to do, knowing that, well, roughly I know the gauntlet goes from my wrist to my elbow, let's go ahead and measure that. Measuring tape. Now, I'll be measuring in inches just because it's going to help simplify things, because we will cover conversion. So I measure from the tip of my elbow to my wrist, and that just so happens to be 12 inches, exactly. So we have the number 12, and of the gauntlet, conveniently enough, we have one here. Of the three different measurements there are for the gauntlet, you have length, you have width, and you have depth. Whenever you're taking the measurements for a piece that you're planning on pepping, always take the longest or most manageable measurement. So in this instance, we took the length, which is 12 inches. And once we have the 12 inches, we're good to go, which is where most people make a mistake. That's not it, because computers are very literal. Now what happens is, this model is in Pepakura Viewer or Designer, and when you set that length, 12 inches in this instance, it's going to go right from the tip to right to the tip, which is not where your 12 inches is supposed to be. For point of reference, and to clarify this, let's pull up a picture. Alright, everyone knows who this is. If you look at the gauntlet, it goes from the wrist, and you can see his elbow does not meet up with the tip. The elbow is actually 1.5 inches back. These are the types of things that people forget about when they're scaling and start pepping out their armor. Be it for Master Chief, Iron Man, or Marine, doesn't really matter. Everything bodes true. Reference pictures are your best friend with this sort of thing. That's where you can see things like if you look at the shin, where it starts just above the ankle and the kneecap would sit about 2 inches below where the actual shin piece ends. So when you measure from your ankle to your knee, you're going to have to add 2 inches to that to compensate for that little point that comes up. Same is true for the elbow. You have this point right here that comes out. So in reality, this is about 13.25 inches. And I had to compensate for that. So that's something to keep in mind when you're measuring yourself out. Don't just measure blindly. Unless you know for sure what the dimensions of a part are, always check reference pictures. One other thing to bear in mind with this is not everyone is proportioned the same way. Some people have thin arms, some people have thick arms, chest, legs, the whole bit. One thing to consider is when you go to try this on, you're like, oh right, great, it fits. It hasn't been hardened or thickened yet. So if something fits you just right at this point, it's not going to fit once you've hardened it and rolled some Rondo and fiberglass around inside it. all of a sudden you're going to constrict that opening, and you're not going to be able to fit properly anymore, especially when most people don't take into consideration an undersuit or clothing or things of that nature. So yeah, that's just another little tip to keep in mind, because it'll save you probably countless hours of work. Just remember that you are going to lose dimension of interior space on all the parts as you thicken and harden them. All right, scaling your PEP files. A lot of people, once again, seem to have quite the good amount of difficulty with this. So let's try and shed some light on this as well. All right, we're just going to pull up a standard Windows calculator that comes with Windows 7, comes with Windows Vista and XP too. So pretty well you're covered. Now all you want to do is in the calculator, you click on View, and then at the bottom here you'll see Unit Conversion. If you click on that, it'll open up a window on the side here. Now this window, you can change what type of unit you're measuring. Right now by default this one's set to angle, gradient, and radian. So we click on angle to open the drop down, and let's go length. And then the first value, let's go inch. So we want to convert from inch to millimeters. There we go. So now we know measurement of 12 inches plus about 1.5 inches, 13.5 inches. So in the from, let's go 13.5 inches. And on the fly converts for you to 342.9 millimeters. One thing to remember about Pepakura Viewer or Designer is it will not deal with fractions of millimeters. You have to round up or round down. I always tell people round up. So 342.9, let's just call it 343 millimeters. So we'll open up Pepakura Viewer, where I conveniently have the gauntlets open. Same Mark 6 Flying Squirrel High Def. And what you'd want to do at this point is go into 2D patterning window, and about halfway down you'll see change the scale of development. And now you just click on specify the scale. Now, here's another place not to get confused, because there are variances with the 3D modelers that create and the people that unfold this. Don't just assume that height is from here to here. Depending on how it was oriented when they exploded it and they broke it down for PEP, that could be depth. Now, being that we're safe in this point and we've dealt with the longest measurement of the piece, just look for here where the longest measurement is. So we have 260, 307, and 120. And see, this is exactly what I'm talking about right now. The width is 307. And width, to me, would be here to here. That would be length to me. That's just the way my brain perceives it. So what we're doing is in the width field, we would change that to the appropriate sizing. And go from there, accept the changes, and then you have some organizational work to do with all the document layout. And unfortunately, there isn't really an automatic way that I know of where you can sort of like align to grid type deal where all the pieces start fitting on. It doesn't mean that there isn't one there, but personally I just like to go through, I like to conserve paper as much as possible, and then I like to group pieces together. So I'll go through manually and just move pieces around and combine them into different windows, just so you'd have the top of the forearm all together on 1 or 2 sheets, and you're not flipping through sheets when you're doing a big piece like a chest, flipping through 20 different sheets of PEP to find the matching piece for the right pectoral. That's just personal preference. Do with it what you will. All right. Okay, so we've covered this, and it's pretty straightforward. Now, if you don't have, for some reason, the Windows calculator that'll give you the conversion table, here, watch this. Just open up a browser. Just go to Google and type convert inches to, and it already starts populating, millimeters. And it'll tell you right there that 1 inch is equivalent to 25.4 millimeters. I mean, even arbitrarily, instead of doing it like that, you can change it with the drop down. It'll give you different units. You can just write, say, 13.5 inches in millimeters. There, and it'll automatically populate it for you. So 13.5 inches is 342.9 millimeters, and you have it just as equal there. And just remember, 342.9, because Pepakura viewer cannot deal in fractions, bump it up or bump it down to an even number. And yeah, that's about it for that. So we're at the point now where we've put in the painful hours it takes to pep something out. And pepping is really, you know, there's times where I like it, there's times where I hate it. I guess it's mood driven, but I mean, it takes a lot of hours when you break it down to pep something out. All right, so we've successfully pepped something out. Everyone's all excited. Now we go and we try it on for the first time. We've measured our length, so we know we're gonna reach properly and everything else. So we just have to put it, uh-oh. My big giant sausage hand doesn't fit through the hole. It happens. Now, I've prepared this in a way that we can see all the different workarounds for it, but Master Chief, Iron Man, none of these characters are anatomically correct. And these pieces, by default, are not designed to slip on and off. Some people, it probably will slip on and off. I have a larger hand, maybe a larger forearm, I don't know, but when I try and put my hand through, that's as far as I can get it. And that is pepped out, or sorry, scaled at 13.5 inches, which is rather large. Now, there's a couple to a few different options you can do here. It's not garbage by any stretch. Now, what I've done is just to get it on, I've actually cut down here and cut down here so it'll fit. But you can clearly see where it's open on both sides. But let's get it on for now. And we can see right away that the length is good. My elbow's right here, and it gives you that inch and a bit of where it should be. And it sits just above my wrist joint, which is where you want it. Because if you go and you measure right at the top of the hand, let's just wiggle this forward. As soon as you try and lift your hand, it's not going to happen. You can already see I'm denting and pushing this pep in. So be realistic, and it's not going to look bad. Just make sure when you put it on, you can lift your hand like this, or you can bend your knee all the way, or you can move your shoulder around if it's a chest piece. So from here, where the wearable position is, so I can move my hand freely to the back end, is a good measure. Just we're running into an issue with the opening for your wrist. Now there's a couple to a few different ways you can attack this. One would be to harden the piece and then cut it right in half, and then all of a sudden it's two pieces. Personally, I don't know that I like that idea. Being that this is something because we thought ahead and we were smart enough to catch this at this point while it's still pep, it would be relatively easy to pick a point, say on the inside of the arm where you're rarely going to see it, and you could literally split this pep right down this seam line and open it back up. And what you could do, depending on how much room you need, you could insert another piece like this and space it out. It could even taper back because you don't need the assistance here in the back because it's a rather large opening. You just need it towards the front. You could modify it. So you open it up and you have a piece that tapers from very thin back here and eventually opens up to say 1/2 inch. And you just glue that piece in with hot glue, and all of a sudden your opening is going to be big enough to accommodate your hand. You know, this can bode true for the shin pieces as well. I've read where a lot of people have issues getting their foot in. Now me, I have a size 11 foot. I haven't pepped out the shins yet, but I'm pretty confident I'm going to have the same issue that I'm having with the forearms. So thinking ahead, and it's on my mind. Now another thing that can be done is split it in half, we covered, adding a little piece inside that allows the dimension to change of the piece just to give you that bit more room. Now you can also get creative. Now what I plan on doing with these is the top right here, which is the top of the forearm towards the front. Once the whole piece is hardened, I'm going to cut this piece out and it'll be its own separate little piece. So it'll allow you to slide your arm right in and give a nice snug fit, and then by means of Velcro or a little clip, you can have this piece sit back on top of the forearm and join back together seamlessly. And you know, these are just the things that you know, you come to realize. Some people think that, oh well, you know what, I pepped it too small, yeah, so I'm gonna have to repep the whole thing. No, you can. It's paper. It's at the end of the day, it's paper. It's really easy to work with. It's really easy to manipulate in your favor. So those are 3 viable and perfectly acceptable options. It all depends on, I guess, your skill level, how much time or effort you're willing to put into a specific piece. Now, in a perfect world, it'll slip right on, and for me, that's not happening. All right, so we'll wrap this up with a few different tips, and we'll just recap the tips we covered. Right at the beginning, we covered always measure, always use reference pictures when you measure, just so you don't get caught with things like that point that sticks out at the elbow. It's stuff that a lot of people don't account for, but it's there and it'll come back to bite you. So always use reference pictures. Know what you're measuring. Know where your measurement needs to start. Know where it needs to end. That's crucial. When measuring to do your scaling and pep, always measure the longest or most broad surface. If you're doing your chest, measure from shoulder tip to shoulder tip. That's where I did mine, because everything else is adjustable. When you're doing your forearms, measure from wrist to the elbow. And wherever you're dealing with that extra bit of space, always take into account that space. Now next, a lot of people go back and forth on this. We're going to discuss paper. Can I use regular printer paper to pep? No. No. Fundamentally, same size, made from the same thing. Let's turn them sideways. Holding them at the same spot, just holding about 1 inch or 2 here. This will not hold up. Some people think that, well, you know, I'll just be careful when I resin it, or you know, I'll use super glue. But the issue is not with the joints. I've never had an issue with a pep piece at the joints. Hot glue holds beautifully. The problem is when you actually go and you resin to harden this stuff. If you're using cardstock, you will notice a bit of sag. The paper basically gets infused with liquid resin and it puts on the weight. Now, the liquid, even though it's not water, being that it is liquid, it will attack the structural integrity of the paper. And on larger pieces like a chest or a thigh piece, you can literally see it as it sits. You can see ripples that weren't there once it's hardened, and those are the areas of the paper that have been attacked by the resin, be it through heat and just sheer weight. It will compromise the structure. If you use regular printer paper, you don't have a chance. Short of it being something really symmetrical and small, printer paper won't hold up. Use cardstock. Always use cardstock. You're just creating more work for yourself. It's going to be a $6 investment for a pack of 500 sheets. Just use the cardstock. As far as glue goes, a lot of people have asked me, Is it okay to use super glue? Well, I use super glue. I find it provides a better joint. Absolutely it will. Absolutely. Super glue will even cause less work later on. If you ever had to dig into a piece after it was hardened, if you were sculpting into a piece, you don't have little pieces of hot glue coming back to haunt you. Simultaneously, as I've said before, you can unglue hot glue. You can't uncrazy crazy glue. Once you mend a piece with crazy glue, it's on. And you know, the only real way to get out is to cut and rip it apart and just remend it from the back. There are some areas where I have used super glue, but primarily, I mean 99% of the time I'm using hot glue to glue all the pet pieces together. Yeah, it's just a matter of convenience, especially when you get into small pieces, and anyone who's done a helmet will know how small the pieces can get. And you know, I personally have had to unglue pieces that I've glued together when it's for a helmet. They're just really small and they're a pain. Now, crazy glue would just, you know, it would just be a bunch of reprinting and recutting and then re-gluing again. And it's just added work. You know, you want to use super glue, feel free, go right ahead. There's nothing wrong with it whatsoever. It'll provide a much sounder joint. You'll get crazy glue all over your hands, but hey, that's neither here nor there because I get hot glue all over my hands. Yeah. Super glue, hot glue, whatever have you. Alright, well, that's pretty well been the basics of it. It's all the rudimentary things that everyone should know about scaling your pep, as everyone seems to call it. Just remember, there's measuring, there's scaling, and there's sizing. And, you know, measuring, a lot of aspects I find are always overlooked. So, you know, keep these little tips handy, do with them what you will. If they serve a purpose, if this has cleared things up for a lot of people, then great, it was time well spent. Yeah. And hopefully that sheds some light on things for everyone who's been asking the questions. And yeah, that's about it for now. Everything will be back up and running. There should be some more build process progress for the chest. We'll get the back and the chest finished up finally and move onward. Until then, everybody take care.